Sahnuun is an activist, and I would like to call him to talk about youth engagement by youth for youth. Welcome, Sahnuun.
Assalamu alaikum. This past summer, I made a trip for the first time to Somalia. I went there with very little knowledge of the language. I went there with very little knowledge of the culture, and I went there with very little understanding of what it was I was going to see. In fact, a lot of preconceived notions about what I was going to expect were shattered even within the first few minutes of arriving. It wasn't as glorious and beautiful as I expected, but I didn't let that get me down. Now, as I got off the Mogadishu airport, as some of you who had the blessed opportunity of going to Somalia know, it's one of the most beautiful things is the descent from the air, because you get to see the entire Indian Ocean splashed out right across your eyes. And once you get into the airport, it turns into chaos. But that chaos goes away pretty quickly after you get out onto your car and you move out through the landscape. Now, one of the things that troubled me the most when I was in Somalia, which is what I'm going to focus on today, are the youth in Somalia. I'm not talking about the youth that have lived there. I'm talking about the Somali Diaspora youth that go back and try to help out the country. I went there with no intention of doing work or getting an internship or anything along those lines, but I ended up doing one. And I worked for the Institute of Migration under the subcategory of the Dariel Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization in Mogadishu. While I was there, I had the opportunity to finally meet some other youth who are going to be working in Somalia and who've come from Canada, Toronto, UK. Everybody had a nickname. I was Sahnuun, Virginia, and then we had Mohamoud who is actually from the UK, and we had everybody from everywhere. But what troubled me was they came, and then after living in Somalia for 2, 3, 4 weeks, they were absolutely finished with it. It's not easy to live in Somalia. You're going to have to take baths in salt water. You're going to have to sleep on, rough beds often, and you're definitely not going to be able to walk to your local fast food restaurant, which was a bigger concern than I thought it should be for most of my fellow diaspora. Nevertheless, it was a concern. And so I started to wonder why it was that as they were leaving and cutting their trip short, I wanted to stay much longer, and I wanted to stay and do much more than than what they seemed to be experiencing. So I thought to myself, what is the reason why these youths are coming here and leaving at such a rapid clip, and what is the issue, and why am I alternatively feeling as if it's something I really want to do and stay around with? And I found out that the answer was actually quite simple. And it laid in their optimism being shattered upon getting there. And as I was going through Somalia, I saw the most devastated buildings that I've ever seen in my life, And as you go through the city, pretty much all you're going to see is rubble, ruins, garbage, and bullet holes, all across the place. And the only reason why I found out that I was able to get through that was because rather than constantly absorbing the environment that I was looking at, I was able to think about what could be. What is the next step? What is beneath this superficial layer of destruction? And oftentimes I would imagine much better things. But the problem was I feel that the other youths didn't have that opportunity and didn't have that understanding that what they're seeing was going to be grim. And I came in with that understanding. And that's what carried me through. And today, I feel that in youth-to-youth engagement, which is the subject I'm speaking on, one of the main things the power of youth is the optimism that they have. And if we lose that optimism, I think that we're going to suffer long term, and Somalia is going to suffer by losing one of its biggest resources. So today I want to give you 3 reasons. 3 reasons why and how you can maintain why you should and can maintain an optimism while you are going to Somalia. But first I want to show of hands of who in this room is planning to go back to Somalia one day or another, maybe in the next 2 years or so. Okay, see, that's a lot of people. See, that's why I feel like this topic is so important. Now, the first thing I want to discuss is the history of Somalia. I find this to be a great inspiration for anybody who wants to go back to the country. Oftentimes, people say, the last generation ruined everything. They were horrible people, and they deserve no credit. But the truth is, many of our fathers and our grandfathers fought two different battles on behalf of our country. 3 different battles on behalf of our country. The first one, they fought against the colonialists, right? This is one of the hardest battles that any country can face, and they fought through it with determination, optimism, and the courage because they wanted to take their country back. Compared to our struggles that we face today of restoring Somalia, it is nothing compared to what our grandfathers had to face in taking back the country from the grips of colonialism. And as we know, Somalia was one of the first countries in Africa to fight off the colonial invaders. And more than that, Somalia had the first democratically elected president after that. So it shows that our grandfathers, we have much to be proud of, and we have little to complain about relative to the situation that they inherited. Now, I think that in terms of our fathers and grandfathers, that is why we should never, I think, look back and say that they messed everything up, because it was a few actors at the end of the day. Many innocent people died in the Civil War, which is the other battle for liberty that our fathers and our mothers fought for. The battle for liberty in 1991 from the dictator who everybody put their trust in, but gave up our trust. He disrespected our trust and, became somebody nobody wanted anymore. But they had to fight for their freedom, and that costed tens of thousands of lives right then and there. Now, I say that because, again, we need to look back on these situations and say, okay, that kind of youthful optimism and that kind of courage and bravery that they fought with is what we should be replicating in today's situation. So there's nothing to complain about in reality. There's only a lot to be proud of and a lot to move forward with at this point. Now, the second reason why I think that it's important, and one thing that when you're in Somalia, you can look forward to, is the fact that beneath the rubble and beneath the issues that we face is an extremely, extremely beautiful country. I mean, as I explained in my intro, the descent from the airplane down to the airport is basically enough for you to be satisfied with the Somalia's natural beauty. But after you go from there, you'll notice that as you go through the city, it elevates. And because it elevates, you can look back down and you'll see the entire landscape, and you'll see the Indian Ocean spread out, smothered across as far as the eye can see, and the waves hitting the shoreline. And it's not sandy and deserty as people may think. It's actually quite beautiful and green. Despite the destruction and devastation, underneath it, there's something very nice. And that's why my main point about saying this is because it is a prize worth fighting for. It's not something that we should discard because it's finished. Rather, it's something we should polish up because it simply has a little bit of dust on it. And as we know, the dust is very little compared to what our past had to deal with. And finally, the third reason why I think we should all, maintain optimism in the idea of helping Somalia is because this is the easiest point and most perfect point for a difference to be made in the country. Not only our parents and our forefathers have been waiting for a long time for stability to suddenly happen, right? And it was not an easy course for Somalia. It's been 2 decades since anybody's been able to really do anything. And now we have a period of time when businessmen even are flocking to the country. Humanitarians finally have the chance to go back. And I would say that since we have this unique period of time, especially this youthful generation, we have this unique period of time to do something, we should. And it's our responsibility to do something. And it makes the situation makes us that much more able to take the situation on because we have this period of stability. So my third reason to be optimistic is basically the time is right for something to be done in Somalia. And in order to just give one tangible youth-to-youth engagement idea that we could all do together is raising awareness for Somalia by doing a joint World Somalia Day, right? Where everybody at their respective, university or college, high school, organization would promote the cause of Somalia for one single day as a group. And I think that could be, very effective in raising awareness because at the end of the day, we don't want to push the world and isolate Somalia. We want to bring the world and help it make Somalia better. And so I hope that everybody can keep in mind if you ever decide to go to Somalia that one, our forefathers fought much harder and much braver than we have to fight at this point to take back our country. Two, we have a country that is unparalleled in natural beauty, which should be fought for. And three, we are at a unique period in our history where we have the opportunity to take charge of our country. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And I guess I remember when we were coming to America, they gave us an orientation telling us about what life is going to be like. So I guess it's time we do that for anyone who's going back to Somalia. Not to expect any fast foods. Our next speaker is Awoowe Hamza, or Hamza Awoowe. Awoowe is our special guest from the UK, or from London, I should say. He has and still is involved with many Somali organizations around the world. He travels a lot, and he's an aspiring author. So if anybody needs writing help, you know who to contact. He's an activist both in the UK and outside of the UK. And he got a new nickname today. He's called the London Boy. Welcome, Hamza Awoowe. And he's going to talk to us about creating a cohesive community organization. Thank you. You have 15 minutes. Pay attention to my flags. Thank you.
First of all, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I start on what I wanted to talk about, there are two things that were touched upon by some of the previous speakers. And it was when Brother Altaf said, he was talking about leaders, and he said, it was those who serve and lead. Because those two things come together. There isn't a leader who doesn't serve. I'm not sure, obviously, that we weren't around a long time ago, but if you remember from history textbooks, or even some of the movies that we used to watch, that any time there was a great war going on, and you have armies across each other, opposite of each other, you always see the generals leading the charge. They were leading by example. They were at the front, struggling as much as everyone else. And by being in charge, by being the leader of the army, they were also serving. And that has gradually changed over time. And it was Sister Rada, I believe it was, earlier on, who said that the second thing was obviously when it comes to leadership, we have a certain responsibility. And I was actually reminded of this responsibility a few days ago when I got a message from a sister who lives in Leicester. Leicester is another city in the UK. And I'm literally going to read out the message to you right now. It's a very short message. and quote verbatim, community guy, our ummah is dying. Why aren't you organizing a protest for Palestine in Leicester? You see, the sister didn't know that I didn't live in Leicester anymore, that obviously I'd moved on several years from now. But I was the only person that she knew that was involved in the community. And as such, she was holding me to account for not organizing anything within the community for what's going on around the world. I gave her a quick call and obviously explained that I wasn't there anymore, and I put her in touch with some of the people that were organizing things. But it's the moment we sort of take on some sort of role model or leadership role, we have a responsibility to serve the community. And this is exactly the same thing that we do when we have community organizations or community groups. When we start a movement, when we start some sort of project, it's exactly the same thing. We have a responsibility towards the people that we are serving. We are there to serve them. It's not them there to serve us. There wouldn't be the need for a community group if the actual community wasn't there. Now, a lot of the things that when we look at community groups is that, in my opinion, there are way too many of them. I mean, if I can just sort of, I don't mean to show anyone else up here, but if I just ask, for example, brother, how many community groups do you know here in the US? If you could just, approximately. How many do you know? But name-wise, just say what, 5, 10, 15?
I haven't got the question. 100.
Do you know 100?
You mean within Somali community?
Yeah, just Somali community organizations inside the United States, yeah.
Yeah, over 100, I think.
Do you know them all?
I don't know them all, but I hear them and I see some.
Does everyone else know about 100, approximately? It took me 30 seconds to get a list of 105 Somali community organizations here in the United States. In the UK, we have over 300. But how many of those do you actively see doing sustainable and continuous projects? How many of those do you actually see being involved with the community on a day-to-day basis? And how many of those are actually actively engaging with the youth, like Brother Sahnuun was talking about, on a day-to-day basis? How effective are these community organizations? I mean, there's a term that we speak about, and it's called briefcase NGOs. It's where they're basically, they're registered as a charity or as an organization. They get some sort of funding from the government or from any other sort of lending. Let's say, for example, and we've had so many examples of this, especially from what I've seen in the UK. They get, let's say, £5,000, about $8,000, to do a community project for the youth. They spend about $1,000 on some sort of football tournament or whatever else. They get all the youth to get together. They take a few pictures with them. They send that off as evidence. And the other sort of $7,000 is pretty much pocketed. Or we don't know where it's gone. And these are real life examples. And this is the problem where a lot of our youth then become demoralized because they know, they can see it's going on. They see like, wait, you got $8,000 to do something for us. We can see you put on a football tournament or some sort of conference or awareness thing, but this only cost you about £1,000, £1,500. Where did the rest of the money go? And wallahi, no word of a lie, there's documented evidence of people having built houses back home with this money, and it's demoralizing to us. Because what happens is the next time some sort of organization or community group tries to start up a project, and they try to reach out to this youth, the youth are like, well, you're just the same as the guy who was before you. And you're probably going to do the same thing. You're trying to, like, you know? Like, and this is the problem that we have, because we have set such an example towards our youth and the rest of our community that they no longer believe in us. They no longer are willing to actively engage with us. So the question is, how do we change this? And how do we become more effective and how do we become more efficient? See, there is something called the 80-20 rule. Has anyone heard of this before? A lot of 5 people. Can raise a show of hands? Wow, only 5 people? Really? Okay, it's basically, it can be applied to anything. It's where 80% of the efforts of the success of the work rate is done by 20% of the people. Whereas obviously the rest of the remaining 80% of the people are doing 20% of the work. And this is where it comes to, where the brother earlier on was saying is we give the responsibilities to the people who are always there, that 20%. And that 20% gets tired after a while. Like, you know, they keep on taking on all this work. They're doing 80% of the work. And they get tired, they get demoralized themselves. So how do we change that as well? That's another question. How do we get those 20% to start spreading or sharing the workload with the rest of with the other 80% who's obviously, you know, doing a little bit less? And the first thing that we have to obviously look at is we have to remain aware of what the other community groups or organizations are doing. Now, I was speaking to some of the brothers about this earlier. I mean, how is it in today's age, and especially for our generation, that it doesn't even matter whether it's all of the States, if we take something else. It's when a person in Columbus, Ohio, doesn't know the people or the organization or the projects that are happening right here, right now, in Seattle, for example. Or how is it that someone in Washington, D.C. doesn't know what's going on somewhere in London? With today's technology and today's internet, there should be no reason for us to not know what every single organization is doing, what services they provide for the people, who they are serving, how long they've done things, you know, and then find out how we can work together with them. Because for those pioneers who obviously initially started up things, they stumbled, they had problems, you know, they made some mistakes. And it took them about, let's say, 2-3 years to get to somewhere where they are a little bit more efficient in their processes. And let's say that's happening sort of right here in Washington, D.C. And then somebody in Cincinnati, Ohio wants to do a very similar project. Instead of learning from the mistakes of the organization or the group who's doing it in Washington, D.C., if they don't connect with them, they start from scratch as well. They make the same mistakes, they come across the same problems, because we are not sharing those lessons that we've learned. And this is the thing, we have to remain connected. There has to be some sort of interdependence between each and every single organization, and especially when it comes to youth groups. And this is when it comes to being cohesive. But how do we do so? How is it that every single person sort of gets together? And this is something that I like to call collective individualism. If each person works hard to improve themselves, then as a nation we grow. So let's say I'll make sure I want to educate myself, I get myself a nice career. It means I have some sort of stability. And with that stability, I set some sort of foundation to be able to help someone else. I mean, there's this saying that goes, you can't help the poor by being one of them. And it's exactly the same way. We want to help every single, obviously, the poor or less fortunate person who's either back home or over here. But how can we do so if we are in no better situation than that person themselves? So we have to first work on ourselves. And once we work on ourselves and then we put in our little bit, then there's no longer 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. It's everyone doing an almost equal share. So let's say we've all sort of, you know, established ourselves. You know, I'm basing on figures from the UK. We have about 250,000 Somalis who live there. If we look at sort of the working age, it's about 100,000, right? If 100,000 each put in $10 a month, it's not a lot of money. You know, everybody pretty much can afford it if you're a working person. $10 a month for 100,000 people. That's $1 million every single month that can be spent on the community. Why do we need to apply for grants from the government? We can do it ourselves. There's no reason why we can't invest into our own projects. There's no reason why we can't invest financially. And there's no reason why we can't invest with our own efforts. You know, it's like aqliyena. Imagine the actual efficiency that we could get from those kind of things. But those things don't happen. I mean, there's a lot of us. I know we send money back home. I know we've sort of got, you know, all these other responsibilities. But there's no way that we can get around these things unless we actually start depending and working together. And one of the first few things is we have to start getting connected. It doesn't mean that you have to, you know, get away from your organization. It doesn't mean that you have to merge with somebody else or you have to have some sort of umbrella foundation. No. You find out what gaps there are in the market right now and how can you fill them. You find out who's providing a service somewhere else and, you know, adopt that model and then apply it to your local community. And these are the kind of things that we have to start thinking about, because if we don't, then we won't change our nation. See, because I thoroughly and I sincerely believe that this generation is a generation blessed with a burden. And I know it's a bit of an oxymoron, but we have a burden that we have to raise our nation with. But wallahi, I'm not even looking, wallahi, it is a blessing. Because through that burden, through the hard work that we have to put in, we become better people ourselves. It means that we have to elevate ourselves. It means that we have to raise our standards. It means that we have to work harder. I tell every single person every day when I meet people, I say to them, listen, the only legacy that I will have is what I leave for my children, is the work effort that I've put in. I want to leave this world a better place for my children to grow up in. But at the same time, I want to raise my children to become better caretakers of this world. See, it's an everlasting cycle. It constantly continues. And if they do the same thing for the next generation, and this is why, for me, the 2020 vision is really, really important, because it's the vision that we have for, in 8 years' time, we can no longer be considered youth. So what efforts have we put in to ensure that we've set the foundations and we've set the framework and the structure for those 14, 15-year-olds who will then become considered youth? And that's what we have to start thinking about now. And this is why we've obviously got the importance of the 2020 vision. And the only way we're going to do that is by being a cohesive and interconnected and interdependent community. And that will only happen, inshallah, through collective individualism. Jazakallah khair.
Thanks, Hamza, for touching on some real important issues up there. I think we could do with better accountability systems and individual responsibility. Now we start taking questions from the audience. We have got about 10 to 15 minutes. Time is very important. You can come up and ask questions if you have anything for the panel. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you guys for being here. This question goes to you, Hamza. What's a good example from London or the UK of a good cohesive organization that actually works and it is effective and it is making progress in the community? And also failures as well.
Okay, wallahi, I've been blessed to see the formation about 18 months ago of a group called SRDF. It's the Somali Relief and Development Forum, and it was basically it was sort of leading up to, it was before the famine was officially announced, but it was basically, we had a representation of 44 different Somali community groups and organizations coming together and trying to map our services. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Is it? It's trying to map our services. Everyone trying to obviously find out what each person or each group is doing in their part of the country or in their city. And then whilst those consultations and those meetings were going on, this is when the famine kicked in, obviously when it was officially announced. And I saw more and more groups trying to join this. And what happened was, because they were able to map their services, they were also able to see what gaps there were, what services they weren't providing. And this was in regards to fundraising. They were able to collectively fundraise. So it wasn't just fundraising when it just happens in London. It was fundraising that was happening in Leicester. It was fundraising that was happening in Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffield. And all these fundraising efforts were cohesive. They were all going towards this, almost like one big fund, but at the same time, because they had this sort of partnership going on, part of the organization of the groups were also on the ground in Somalia. So it was the same groups literally getting the funds from the local community and then delivering the services in Somalia itself. And then we had like instant feedback, because whilst they were there, we had obviously we had a couple of camera people who were on the floor as well, and they literally just sent us videos, daily videos back, to obviously show the people, this is where your money is going to. There were some people who obviously were a little bit dubious about, are you sure the money is being spent well, and those kind of things. And there was another group who obviously joined in with this. They're called the Global Somali Response. And what they did was they said, okay, let's say you have £10,000. Come over here. Come to Somalia. We'll facilitate it for you. Come. Bring the money that you've raised. Bring it to Mogadishu. Bring it to every other part of the country you want to do. We'll arrange for transport. We'll take you to the places where you can buy the food or where you can buy the supplies. You buy it with your own hand. Spend your £10,000 that you've raised, and then we'll help you deliver it, and you come help us, obviously, deliver it to the people. And all that was then documented as well. So for me, this is one of the more beautiful examples of people being more cohesive. And this is, I think, again, this is when I speak about us being blessed with a burden, is we tend to show our best sides when we're faced with the biggest crisis. This is when the best of us comes out. And this is also, at the same time, it's both a benefit and an advantage as well as a disadvantage, because it doesn't last long. And this is what we have to focus on. We have to focus on some sort of sustainability, because it went for a few months, and after that, obviously, people started losing a bit of focus. They got tired, because it was the same 20% still putting in most of the effort, even though a lot of people were joining in. In comparison to the wider community, it was still 20%. But to me, that was one example of when it worked, and it worked beautifully.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
This question is for Awoowe. How you said that it's Somali non-profit organizations around the world should, get to know each other, find out what each organization is doing. How is that done? Is there how do you bring those people together, either on the internet or otherwise, so that they can, exchange ideas?
And this is when I talk about this generation leading these efforts, because there's so many ways we can do it. We can have group Skype meetings. We can email each other. It's through Facebook. We have Facebook groups where we've literally, I remember doing a campaign about 2 years ago, and literally we had a Facebook group where people were just from Holland, from Sweden, from Denmark, Norway, when we had people from the UK, they were all joining in. And we were literally finding out what each and every person was doing. And through those efforts, through the ease of technology, we were very quickly able to see which group does what and what other groups are there. And each group obviously has some sort of personal responsibility. So for example, the group that was, if this was the United States, if I was going to go to a group in, I don't know, I'm going to talk to you guys because you guys are from Ohio right now. If I go to the group from Ohio, I'd expect them to know all the local Somali community organizations in Ohio. If they didn't know, I'd expect them to find out, because you're there locally. And the thing is, if each person finds out about the local activities, about the local projects, about the local organizations, and then feeds that into the collective, this is how we find out. And this is, again, it comes back to that collective individualism. Is each individual putting in their little bit, and then it obviously having some sort of benefit towards the collective. And it's part of that responsibility again. It's obviously leading it with each person that you meet. And there's something I wanted to share, and this is slightly on the topic, but off the topic as well. It comes to that responsibility that we have of not just with Somali people, but also with non-Somali people. There's a message that was sent to me. Literally, I'm looking at it. It's 5 hours ago. This is from a white Dutch young man who lives in Amsterdam. And I had the pleasure of meeting and getting to know him when I lived with him in Ireland, and if you look at it, it's beautiful. A Somali person and a Dutch person both meeting each other in a little village in Ireland. Through our conversations, we always spoke about things. And he wrote a 4-sentence poem. I'm going to quickly read it out to you. And his name is Nick Post, by the way. So he'll like this when I mention his name later on. But it goes, if we see beyond the limiting visions of our enslavers, we'll be a prodigy, but society will label us as misbehaviors. But don't let that bring you down. Believe in your visions, because no matter how small the person, they'll make a difference. And this is him just speaking about in general, but then he tagged me and sent me the message saying, well, see, this applies to you and your Somali community. This applies to you and the efforts that you're trying to make. And this is the responsibility that we have. We don't just have the responsibility towards our Somali brothers and sisters. We have the same responsibility towards the non-Somali people that we meet, that we actually put the effort in to educate them about things, to get them involved in things, to get them interested in things. And you very quickly see that they can then give their perspective on things. And this is how we do it. It's the youth. The youth obviously being able to take that step and take, obviously, their individual efforts and then add it to the collective. Jazakallah khair.
Are you the moderator or he's the moderator? Oh, so you gave me permission to talk?
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, I think something that Sahnuun said, and I'm going to say it with a Z, I think it's Sahnuun. Is it? Is it Za or Seen? Sahnuun or Sahnuun? It's okay. Good. Okay, it's something he said that poses a challenge to all of us. And that is, he said, a number of the expatriates, the young expatriates that he saw, were quickly demoralized, and this is not his word, and they went back. And I think this poses a challenge to all of us. How do we prepare the youth, our youth, for the situation where, whereby they go back to Somalia and they don't get quickly demoralized? I think that's extremely important. And I would like all of us to think of that. How do we prepare them? I think we need to be very realistic with them. I think we have to foster a spirit of adventurism. We have to pose it, on the one hand, they are going back to their land, and there must be something to really desire about that, something romantic, the land of their forefathers. I mean, we all like that, right? When we read about those things in the books or see them on movies, we all love that. And on the other hand, we have to present it as an opportunity and a challenge. So they will be fully prepared when they go there. There are things they don't like. This is a country that's there for you to reclaim. This is a virgin land that's there for you to develop. And if they go in with that kind of attitude, that approach, that mentality, I think they will love it. There is a lot to love about Somalia. Thank you.
So my question is for Hamza. We're in an age right now of information overload, as you know. Live streaming, you can see thousands of tweets in 30 seconds. Facebook, people have thousands of friends on there. So it's very easy to get to lose connection with people. How do you recommend that youth find their niche within the social media realm? Because it's a quick way to build community, especially as spread out as we are as Somali people. I know I'm not going to see you after this conference for a while, and subsequently some of the people here from Ohio. So speak on the issue of social media and how Somalis can use it productively and not just, comment negatively on YouTube videos or bash each other on Facebook pictures.
One of the first few things that we have to remember, and I think it's what Brother Altaf spoke about previously, touched upon it. It was the first P, purpose. What are you using social media for? I mean, yes, it's social media. You use it to socialize, but what else are you using it for? Are you using it to spread some sort of message? Are you using it to highlight certain things, to raise some sort of awareness? What purpose are you using it for? How are you spending your time? If you spend 4 or 5 hours on social media, I mean, it's quite a lot of hours, but if you spend 4 or 5 hours, how are those 4 or 5 hours spent? Is it you spending 4 or 5 hours in discussions, debates? Because I've had some amazing ones on Facebook, wallahi. I've had some really constructive debates where we've taken some things away and we've actually worked on them, and projects have started from them. And it's how do you use your time constructively on social media? And in regards to the information overload, this is something that I believe, if anything, once we get that information as a collective, because that's the thing, the reason why there's information overload is because you're getting it from all angles. You're getting it from every single person that you might know or you don't know. Whereas if we actually collected that information if we collected the statistics, the data, then we're able to actually analyze it. Once we analyze it, then we're able to sort of shorten it and summarize it, and then we can spread it out. This is when, you know, I mean, it's, for example, we get information overload about Somali politics, for example, right? You know, there's so much going on in the Somali government, whether it was the transitional government or the government right now. But how many of the youth actually understand the structure of the Somali government right now? If I asked you about the structure of the American government, I'm sure you could tell me A, B, C, D, and E, whether it's Congress or, you know, the other types of houses, you can tell me. But how many Somali youngsters actually know the structure of the Somali government right now? And this is the thing, we get information overload about Somali politics, but how many of it is actually effective? How many of it's actually, you know, relevant information? There's no point in telling a person 4, you know, as just giving them the answer of 4, and not telling them whether you're asking the question of 2 plus 2 or the 100 square root of 4,500 and something. Don't quote me on this, by the way. I'm just throwing a number out there. You have to make information relevant. And that's the only way you're going to get rid of information overload, is by when you collect it, analyze it, deconstruct it, and then summarize it for people in a way that they will understand. When we talk about this pact about to prepare people to go to Somalia, it's the same thing. We have to collect this data. We have to collect this information. If we don't do it, other people have already started doing it. The non-Somalis have already started collecting all this data on us. But if we don't start doing it for ourselves, then how are we going to actually improve our situation? Because it's not that they're beating us because they're smarter than us, because they're not. They're actually, one of the comments that was made earlier, I honestly believe as well, Somali people are one of the smartest people on earth. Maybe the Chinese beat us, but that's about it. But aside from that, they're not beating us because they're smarter than us. They're beating us because of our ignorance. We have information overload. We're in a technological age, yet still we are ignorant. And how is this possible? I know it's not a nice thing to say, and while a lot of people might disagree with me, say, well, no, I'm not ignorant. Well, I like to believe I am. I have quite a bit of knowledge, but the more you find out, the more knowledge you learn, you also realize how little you actually know. You realize how little you actually know about everything that's going on out there and how much information is actually out there and available. So the only way we're going to actually do this, we have to, whether it's some sort of Somali information hub, whether we get together, you know, it's like a tariq dena, our culture, our history, going back all the way, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 years, start from, you know, from Queen Arawelo to all the way now. We have to know this. And once we document those kind of things, then we can put it out into shorter sections that are more relevant for our people, inshallah.
I'll take 3 or 4 more questions. So, okay. Comment? Hamza is an operations manager for a finance company in London.
That's my day-to-day. That's what pays my bills.
He also travels a lot and writes part-time.
Okay, remember when we talked about using your time constructively, and when the brother spoke about sitting in Starbucks? I'm not necessarily a Starbucks fan or go to these kind of areas. But everything I do, I have almost become synonymous with my cause. There isn't a single person that knows me from having grown up with me till now that will ever say to you, Hamza does something that's not related to the Somali community, or Awoowe is doing something that isn't related to the Somali. There isn't a single person who will say this. The moment I finish with work, I will either go to a meeting about some sort of project, whether it's, you know, about refugee youth or whatever else. I'll go to an event. I'll go meet, even if I meet up with my friends, the topic of our discussion is literally how can we improve our actual situation. I have friends of mine who were never interested in anything to do with improving the Somali community or even getting involved. But through following some of the things that I was doing on Facebook or whether it was on Twitter or whatever else, I'd come back to either my home city or I'd see them after like not having seen them for a few months. And they'll tell me like, these are usually, let's say for example, the guys that just chill on the street corner, they mind their own business, they do whatever else they're doing, talking about, you know, the latest football or gangster rap or whatever else. And I'd meet them and say, hey, you know, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum salam, long time no see. And they'd be like, wallahi, I watched your video, you know that. And then they tell me like a summary of all the research that they did since then because they got interested in it. And this is the thing, it's using your time effectively. For me, I see no reason for me to be involved in anything else aside from the Somali community. If there's nothing that I can't do to actually leave this legacy behind for my children, then what am I doing? This is what I mean with our generation being blessed with a burden. I have a friend of mine, a brother, his name is Deq Africa. He's one of the people who are very hopeful and actually moved back to Mogadishu a few months ago. But there's a couple of years ago when we actually said that we called ourselves the NNG, and that stands for the now or never generation. Either this generation will either change things now, or it will never change. If we don't do things now and prepare for the generation that will become the youth when it's 2020, if we don't set this 2020 vision right now, then it will never happen. Because every generation you see, you know, whatever else, they lose interest. Each generation that goes on. So if we don't pass it on to them right now, then nobody will.
Okay, I'll take a couple more questions, but before I do that, I want to quick comment on the accountability idea you threw it out there. I think there is one thing I like, one idea proposed by the USAID, especially the TIS group. Recently, they are trying new accountability system within Somalia and Africa in general, which is basically if you are an NGO working in Somalia, you have to prove you have a track record of delivering results. And then you have to have financial capacity that you can actually deliver what you are asking for. And then you have to compete in a business sense as fair competition. You'll be graded accordingly, and then based on your reputation and credibility, you will be given the project. It's one project at a time. If you deliver on that project, then you can ask for another project, and you will get feedback and recommendation from that team. But you have to do it on your money, and then they will reimburse you later. So if you can't document all the stuff you have done, and if it doesn't add up, the math, you are messed up. Nobody's going to pay you, and you won't get any more business. So I think that's a model for every Somali activist to use. If you don't want to go to Somalia, that's fine. Just make sure you follow the models that's effectively working for some organizations. That's a new idea, but I like it. It's much better than giving you a blank check, hosting a soccer event, and then collecting the rest of the money. So I'll give.
Can I make a quick comment on that, real quickly?
Yes.
I won't say too much. It's just on the basis of accountability.
Yes. keep
I don't necessarily agree with what the brother just said, but I'll speak about it later when I touch on the civil society aspect of things, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
I guess this question is directed towards Sahnuun. I know you had asked the audience how many of you guys plan to go back to Somalia, and quite a few hands shot up. But my question to you is, how can we make this a reality, not just a dream? I know many of us do plan to go back to Somalia and contribute at some point. If we're not working with NGOs or other organizations, what can we do at individual levels, and what can we contribute?
Well, thank you for your question. I have a very simple answer to your question, actually. The way I got to Somalia was I literally just worked over the summer. No one really, told me that I had to go. And I think that anybody in this room has the capacity to go if they truly desire to go. The ticket, although you may have some difficulty in getting housing, a safe place to stay in Somalia. Luckily, I have very close relatives in Somalia, so I was able to stay in a safe place. But if you have about, between $1,500 and $2,000 for your ticket to Nairobi, and then you take about $200 to $300 for your ticket, round trip ticket, $400 actually, $400 to $500 for your round trip ticket between Nairobi and Mogadishu, which will come out to between $2,000 and $2,500 total for your trip, then you can literally go if you just want to go to Somalia, if you have the people there to support you. And also, although it is a little bit more complicated than that, because there is a fear factor in going to Somalia, and I had to overcome the fear factor before I went to Somalia. It's dangerous, so you have to be prepared to accept the fact that there's an element of danger in the situation, and your family has to be okay with the fact that there's an element of danger. And then it's really up to just really how badly you want it. I wanted to go to Somalia for years, and this summer was actually a great opportunity. And I really, inshallah, this next summer is also going to be a very good opportunity for anybody who wants to go. So, if you want it badly enough, you can definitely get it.
I want to say thank you to both of you, because I think you guys touched on so many important pieces. And just wanted to mention that, but the first Somali Diaspora conference, we had two college students, two young ladies, who came to the conference, and within a year or so, they started their own nonprofit organizations. And that organization is called Mercy to Mankind. You can Google it and look at it. And many of you probably know that. And these two ambitious young ladies, sisters, did extremely well while going to school full time. They were able to put together organizations, establish some partnerships with the existing Somali NGOs and also the non-Somali NGOs. And today I wanted to tell you that they are managing and running a nonprofit orphanage in Mogadishu and are expanding. So yes, youth can do a lot of things if they put it to their mind. And a lot of information now is online. They can create their NGOs and so forth. But there are also a lot of people who, like you said, an NGO in a suitcase, or I don't know what you said, but
briefcase NGOs.
Briefcase NGOs, yes, and those are also existing. But I think what we need to do here, for example, during the famine, several Somali organizations came together. Actually, 3 of them came together, 2 locals and 1 in national. And they decided that they were going to do a joint fundraiser. They put their money together, and they were able to share their money, collaborate efforts, and work on trying to improve the lives back at home. So there are good things. Good things are happening, and I think what we need to do is recognize those and not be cynical, because I think cynicism is a major problem in our community. Anybody who's trying to do something, we question 50,000 times, never giving them the benefit of the doubt. So I think we need to really sometimes sit back and just say, okay, this person is doing this thing. Let's support them and understand about what they're trying to accomplish. That's it. Thank you.
More questions?
dhalinyaraha Soomaaliyeed oo sidaan oo kale waddanka inta ku laabtay haddana ka sheekeynaya waa waxa kaliya igu abuura rajo iyo wanaag maalmaha ka mid ah waddanka ku laabanayo lama helo inta badan Soomaalidu dhalinyaradu halkan way isbedeleen oo waxay la qabsan dhaqanka qurbaha qof Soomaaliya waxa laga haystaa inay meel bahal ku nool yihiin oo dugaa ku nool yahay oo lagu noolaan karin Soomaaliya isna Muqdisho Soomaaliya Muqdisho maahan dadku inay ogaadaan Soomaaliya iyo Muqdisho waa kala labo meelo waxaa jira Soomaaliya dagaal baan laga aqoon hadaa tagtid xabad adkaas awligood bal lagama maqal xabad nabadgelyo ka jirto mudug haan iyo nabadgelyo ka jirto dadku aan toogna u saacadeen ninka iyo hargeysa ku darba darabtay markaas Sahnuun waxa weydiin lahaa walaalkay intii aad Soomaaliya joogtay inkastoo aad rajo weyn siisay waan ku mahadsantahay jazakallahu khairan waxyaalihii marka xabadda iyo laga soo tago waxyaalaha guryaha burburay waxyaalaha wanaag iyo khayr kale oo aad aragtay oo ku soo jiitay oo quruxda badan dhinaca xun naga daayay dhinaca fiican wixii aragtay maxaa ku qurux badnaa badda marka laga soo tago badda waa noo sheegtay jazakallahu khairan
So Sahnuun, I guess they were asking what one thing would you change from your trip? That was one question. The other one was. Oh no. Okay. No. The other one. Did you get it? I
got it. To answer the first question, to be honest with you, the first thing that I noticed and that I wanted to change was the actual look of the country. It looked horrible. So I actually, before this summer, I wasn't even considering doing civil engineering. In fact, I didn't even like math. right? But one of the things I realized was why not graduate with a civil engineering degree so that I could at least build something, once I get there. And and we should probably hold the applause. I might change my mind. But anyways, if I don't do that, there's actually a number of ways to beautify the country. There's NGO work, and there is great NGO work going on to clean up the streets and the garbage in the streets. I'm sure everyone saw those articles on like the trash being cleared out of the streets. Because the one thing that I saw was, immediate shame was how in bad shape everything looked. And to answer the other question, the thing that would probably the most beautiful to me, and it survived all of the bullets and the beating, was definitely the Lido Beach. I went to Lido Beach for a period of time while I was in Somalia, and the sight of the ocean and the beach was remarkable. So I would say that would be definitely the most beautiful part of Somalia, in my opinion.
السلام عليكم. سؤال أنت بدن the question's been repeated many times is regarding productivity and how you utilize the Facebook in a very efficient way. And I would recommend everybody to read or look into David Allen's book, Getting Things Done. So many questions are answered when the telephone was first invented that people's quality of life will be also impacted. This is the same concerns for successful people also to utilize their time, take advantage of these technologies, and also to make sure that they are productive at the same time. And going back to Sahnuun and going to Somalia for the first time, I'm over 40. I'm not going to say exactly what is my age, but it was my first time to go this summer. And it was a different, I had the resources, and all day I was hearing about NGOs. People should think about private sector and business. That's why I could afford to go there, and I'm hoping to go back again. The only thing that I regret is I had close to 30 to 40 people working between cooks and drivers and so on while I was there. And unfortunately, I left those behind. And there was a lot of young people with 6 or 8 children. Some of them are 20 years old with multiple wives. And they didn't have anything to do after that, but somehow they survive. So going back with a business idea other than writing grants all the time and be independent from those donors, that should be something you guys think about. Going back to engineering, think about solar engineering, electricity, agricultural engineering also. A lot of cows were in front of my house, and we couldn't really use them for dairy products or even biofuel. And the only thing that I really tell those who didn't go there to be optimistic and take something positive with you when you go back out of this conference today. There were a lot of good things. Sense of humor, you don't have any stress. The stories, it's unbelievable. Good restaurants, good food, organic, clean. The beach, of course, which is not utilized at all. It's hilarious how people manage, and they have some things that we don't have it even here, like mobile banking. I was really flabbergasted paying the garbage man. He's really on a donkey cart, but he's having his cell phone. I'm paying him in dollars, no fractions, $2, $3 twice a week. The other thing also I've noticed during the presentation is if you ever been to Florida Busch Gardens and like those roller coasters like Shikra or the Congo River, it's you'll have a heart attack. But when you leave it, because of the adrenaline and you enjoy that ride, you want to go back again. And that's exactly how I feel about Hamar to begin with. It's beautiful, it's exciting, it's a lot of crisis mood, but that's how we become productive. Thank you very much.